how, as admission officers, do you assess qualities in an applicant?
So we're looking for those students that are really academically curious, that have gone beyond their school curriculum to explore their subject.
It's not about checking boxes off, it's about really understanding who the student is as a person.
We'll look at your personal statement. We will probe through interview to discover that authenticity.
The student also has to be really comfortable in being authentic and telling their own story.
What are 3 qualities or skills that are necessary for every applicant?
We're less interested about all the presentations or all the papers that you've had published. We're more interested in why you decided to research that paper.
The strongest application you can make is something that excites you and something that you're really passionate about.
The UCAS process does have an AI checker on it as well.
Welcome to another episode of the Shiv Nadar School podcast. Today, we aim to shed some light on the ever-changing dynamics of college admission. I'm Kanvi Raheja, a grade 11 student at the Shiv Nadar School Noida campus, and I'm joined by some incredible guests. We have Miss Sarah Hales, the Senior Regional Manager of the South Asian Division, representing the University of Cambridge. We have Mr. Luke McGrath, Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the New York University. We have Miss Nitina Dua, our Executive Head of the Career Guidance Center here at Shiv Nadar School, and our very own Shiv Nadar School Gurgaon alumni, Agastya Rao, who's currently studying jurisprudence at the University of Oxford. To begin with, it's an absolute honor to host a panel here with such vast experience. And for today, we would like to go beyond the typical college advice. And I would like to start off the conversation with a question that I had at the back of my mind. It's a very common perception among students that getting admission into universities is all about marks and grades and checklists. But the world is changing. With AI, automation, and cross-disciplinary jobs taking the spotlight, as university representatives and admission officers, are universities still looking at taking in students who fit in the skill sets of the past? Or are you truly looking for the applicants who can thrive in the future?
Thank you. I'm happy to pick that up first. In the UK, typically universities still look at grades. The reason for this is that students, rather than joining a university and choosing a major, join a university with a major already chosen. However, having said that, although we do put emphasis on educational ability and educational grades, there is the need to be able to adapt to the future, and many courses in the UK, and at Cambridge in particular, build in some of that cross-disciplinary function and skills for the future.
Of course, Mom. So would you like to add?
Sure, I would say, for the U.S., I think that what you mentioned there about a checklist, students being so concerned of, marking off certain things that they need to do for the application, right? A lot of times students will ask me, what can I do to basically get into your university? What should I do? And that's such a common question. And I understand why students feel that way. In the US, as opposed to the UK, we have, generally speaking, a more comprehensive review process, a holistic review process. So I'm not going to lie, academics are important. It's going to be an academically driven review process. So grades are important. That's kind of one of the first things that we look at. But we're also looking at, everything that the student is doing, everything that they're interested in doing, and students do have the time to decide what field they really want to get into. I mean, there's a few caveats to that. Sometimes you do have to know. But I think it is important that students, have training in the future. Like you mentioned, with AI is just going to be kind of a part of every subject, regardless of what you're interested in. So it really is important that students stay up with trends, and that does come through on the application process. So I think it's a balance. It's kind of, still having, some roots in the past and kind of coming across genuine in the application, but also being up on current trends as well.
Absolutely. So a common point I got from both the perspectives was that there is a reputation for being academic first. But then how, as admission officers, do you assess qualities in an applicant beyond the exam, which probably you won't get from a written examination, such as independent thinking or even resilience, for say?
Absolutely, a great question. At Cambridge, it's not myself as admission staff that looks into these qualities. Once a student applies, their application goes directly to the academics that are teaching them. So that is investigated through that academic. And it might be through things like their personal statement. So we're looking for those students that are really academically curious, that have gone beyond their school curriculum to explore their subject. And that will be probed as well in things like the interviews. We interview all our students, so we can really get an idea for a student's passion, commitment to the subject, and their ways of thinking as well, and their style of learning, because it's not just where you go, it's the style of learning and the best fit university for you.
Of course.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of going off of that, I think, part of the application process and part of our review process for students is understanding that word best fit, where a student is going to be most happy and most successful. And that's going to come through in the application. For example, at NYU, we really put an emphasis on this global mindset. We have campuses all over the world. We have campuses in New York and Abu Dhabi and Shanghai, as well as 13 other global campuses. So part of, when we're reviewing students is kind of getting a sense of if a student has that interest, that interest in global context and cross-cultural exchange. So it's kind of a matter of putting all those things together through the extracurricular activities, the essays, the letter of recommendation, the academics that the student is interested in, all of that.
Connecting back to my first question, where there is a changing job market in terms of there are a different set of expectations from my generation, if I were to say. There is a requirement for a mastery on AI. There is a deep knowledge on automation. Considering all these factors in, does this changing job market influence the kind of students you want to admit in your respective universities? I
wouldn't necessarily say so. I do think it's ultimately important what the student's vision is for their career. We don't want to totally, for the institution does not want to force the job market on the student. Of course, we want to connect them with the job market that they're interested in. And I think that, partly the job market is shaped by the students that come in. We're really excited by, new students that come into university with new ideas. And part of that is, I think that's great that, you're preparing in all those ways with AI and automation. And I think that, the students of the future of next year or the following year, they're going to come in with fresh ideas. Of course, we have a lot of resources to connect students with the job market. We encourage students to get internships, and we have a career center on campus that we encourage students to get connected with early. And so it's just a matter of finding that match for students, really.
I agree with a lot of what Luke said. We've always looked for those students that are passionate about their subject, that want to drive their subject forward, that want to break boundaries within their subject. As a research-driven university, we're always looking for those students that want to come in and research further, find new ways of doing things. And again, connecting them with the outside world through our careers service, through our industrial relations, and keeping up with the kinds of jobs that those students will be then going out into once they graduate.
Of course. Now, changing the perspective a bit, in the new set of applications that you receive, these days there are a lot of buzzwords going around, such as entrepreneurship or leadership and innovation. But I would say that these words are now very commonly used and rather casually, if I were to say. How do you actually spot the value in these words in the application you assess?
It's not necessarily true that every student is going to have to be an entrepreneur. If you're interested in studying languages and literature and you want to be an academic, it's not necessary that a student comes through as an entrepreneur in their application. So if a student wants to study entrepreneurship, then absolutely, I think, they're going to have to, have a little bit of interest and background in entrepreneurship. And I do think leadership is going to be, it's a good quality to have. You don't necessarily have to have, you're still a high school student. I know there's a lot of pressure on high school students to be involved in as much as they can and take on leadership opportunities when they can. I do think it's a good thing to do. It's a great experience to have, and it will prepare you for university. But we would understand if you don't have such a wide breadth of leadership positions already. So I think it's just looking at the context of all those things. And yeah, they can be buzzwords, but we'll look at the context. Again, it's not about checking boxes off. It's about really understanding who the student is as a person.
And I think for the UK and for Cambridge in particular, the personal statement is the piece of writing, the college essay, if you like, that you would use to apply. And it's actually quite a guided piece of writing now. It's 3 guided questions. What we are looking for in this very short academic piece of writing is more where you've gone beyond your curriculum to demonstrate to us that you're interested and passionate about studying the subject you want to study. So yes, you're right, entrepreneurship, innovation, that's great, but keep it linked very specifically to what you have done regarding your subject. So we're not looking to tick off those words as we see them in a personal statement. We're looking to see a student's reflection on what they've learned from their experiences in this.
Of course. And now talking a bit outside of academics, the question I'm going to ask now is one I'm dying to hear the answer to, because something I personally wanted to ask you. We all have heard the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. How do you differentiate between a student who has a lot of skill sets, experienced different fields, versus one who has shown a deep impact in a few? And if I were to say, how do you value both of these set of students?
I think that it really is important, the quality. When I read an application, sometimes I can just kind of tell when a student has tried to list as many possible extracurricular activities, for example, as they can. So there'll be 25 things, and I can barely tell, did they really spend very much time in this club or organization? So first of all, I think it's important that a student is passionate. I think that passion comes through for the subject and the interest. So, if it's clear that a student has spent a lot of time in a certain thing, that's a really important thing. Then, as far as you mentioned, like jack of all trades, master of none, I think it's not a bad thing if a student is interested in many different fields. And I think that's really unique, and it can bring, we are looking for a diversity of perspectives, and we're looking for uniqueness in students. I just think it's a matter of that balance of not just listing as many things as possible, and really it was very superficial, against like being interested in multiple things.
Right.
At Cambridge and at many other UK universities, we are looking less at that breadth and actually more of that depth of interest. So because of the need to state your major and join a university studying that major, we are looking for students that are really passionate about that subject. Because as we've touched on earlier, you're going to be studying that subject for 3 years at least in really great depth. We want you to enjoy your time with us. So we actually look for that depth of interest. We're less interested in your extracurriculars, your sports and things. Please continue to do them. They're great for your mental health, and they're fabulous to do while you're with us at university. But we're looking for that passion for the subject of interest. And again, you might write on the personal statement about 15 books you've read or 3 different projects that you've undertaken. We are much more interested in perhaps 1 or 2 books that you've read that you can comment on in great depth. We're less interested about all the presentations or all the papers that you've had published. We're more interested in why you decided to research that paper. So it's all about the reflection and the passion for that course. But as we've said, please continue to do all those things that make you a great, diverse person.
Of course. And that's a very insightful admission officer's perspective. But if I were to ask you, Agastya, as a student who's just gone through this process right now, how did you manage to strike that balance between showing that you have a deep understanding on certain topics, but at the same time, you've gone and explored as well?
I think that's one of the advantages of the UK admissions process in particular, and especially for an Oxbridge application. I think the first barrier, of course, you have to clear is the assessments and your marks. But beyond that, what I felt they were looking for was a deep academic interest in the subject. So my research was very focused. And I think the way I showed a deep exploration of subject was a brief mention of a few of my extracurriculars, which were debate and fencing. But a majority of my research and my personal statement was focused on research I did on a topic called the Uniform Civil Code, which is a very unique India-specific issue about balancing personal religious laws with laws that affect the whole country. And I think when I compared that with international law, I think that's what really stood out with my application and showed a breadth and diversity of research that I did while remaining focused to a central point of my application.
There's one thing that Mr. Luke said which struck to me is that a balance, and which all of us have emphasized on. And a personal instance I remember was when in 9th grade I went to Nitina ma'am to ask her the exact same question. She told me that for an Indian student, grade 9s and 10s are all about exploration. And then when you enter into 11th, you have to understand what suits you, what floats your boat. And that also gives us a balance about on exploration and at the same time deep understanding. But now shifting my perspective to a student who's much younger or much earlier in their application phase, probably a 9th grade student who's entering into the phase of college admissions, understanding how the ecosystem works, that intimidating phase of coming into high school. For many Indian students, the first dining table conversation would be whether to apply in India or abroad. But regardless of the geography you apply to, I would want to know from the experts here, what are 3 qualities or skills that are necessary for every applicant in this day and age, regardless of where you apply, and which will help you thrive in the future? Ma'am, why don't we start with you?
Great question and great inputs from Sarah, Luke, and Agastya. As I said, grade 9 and 10 is about exploration. You really, really have to understand what your own strengths are before you make a choice to say, where am I looking at? And what country or what course am I looking at? Also, what is really critical and what is really important is prestige over fit. There's a lot of time that a lot of us are just running after, of course, we're looking at the best in the world, and we're aiming for that, all of us do. But the fact is that we have to be real, right? I think both Sarah and Luke would agree, and this is what I do in the college counseling office at Shiv Nadar School, is the why and how. When a student comes in, why has he picked up or she picked up to do a certain activity, and how he or she is approaching it. And I think the student also has to be really comfortable in being authentic and telling their own story. And when you passionately are able to kind of put that own story and your own growth story in the application, I think admission officers can truly read that. So the why and how is important. Fit over prestige is important. Being authentic is important. And when you keep all of this alive, for specifically when I talk about the Indian student community and the Indian mindset, it's also many times the journey from the known to the unknown. We first want to look at areas that, all right, I think these are my strengths. These are the areas that I can look around in terms of exploring. And once you dive deeper into it, you realize, I probably do not want to do this. And then you get into the space of elimination. I probably do not want to look at a certain subject. I want to explore something else. And that's where you graduate and move on to the grade 11, 12 story where you start planning your exit.
Right, ma'am. And there was one word you used that was being authentic. And that's something I've come across a lot in my journey as a Shiv Nadar School student, where we are taught to first of all be authentic and true to yourself, if I were to say. Not trying to impersonate a personality or an application, because there is no perfect personality or application per se. Right? So just being true to yourself is the basic thing you can do. Now coming back to our admission officers, you would have a large bunch of applications you receive from around the world, different ethnic, social backgrounds. Where do you see Indian students excelling, and where do you think there's a gap that needs to be bridged? And why don't we start with you?
We don't have caps on any international students. So at Cambridge, we are simply looking for the best students for the course, regardless of where they come from in the world. So where I see, I suppose, the most popular courses for students coming from South Asia are areas such as law, things like computer science, STEM, very, very popular courses within the UK and particularly at Cambridge. Where we see less students coming from South Asia are areas such as literature, languages, humanities, and Indian students are equally as strong at those subjects, and we'd welcome more of them in those subjects.
Of course.
Yeah, I think I'd really reflect exactly what Sarah said. I think that, I tend to hear, from students in India again, business majors, STEM majors, computer science. I hear that a lot from prospective students. And it's more uncommon that I'll hear a student that's interested in the performing arts, say, or literature, for example. I'm super excited when I hear a student that's interested in that thing, just because it's not as common for me to hear that, at least in India, for example. But also, NYU also does not, we don't have any caps on certain countries or anything like that. We really are reviewing applications more so just within the applicant pool of the school that they're applying to, regardless of where they're coming from.
Of course, that gives us a very deep insight on which fields are Indian students interested in, and which sometimes can be a second priority for them. But talking about on the subject of Indian students excelling abroad, Agastya, you were at an aspirational position for a lot of high school students right now. Can you guide us through your high school journey once? And looking back, what do you think the admissions team at Oxford saw in your application beyond your grades? And if I were to ask in specific, was there any project or initiative that you took up which turned out to be more valuable than you thought initially?
Thank you. That's a really good question, actually. I was very sure that I was going to study law. I think I knew from 9th grade that I wanted to study law in particular. And that's when I realized that the UK was probably going to be the best and the most straightforward option for me, purely because it's a 3-year law degree and you can dive straight into the legal career and the legal field. Again, with the UK application, it's very academic driven and it's about displaying interest in your subject in particular. So a lot of my preparation for my application was driven by research in things I was interested in, particularly in international law. So a lot of my research was about the law of the sea. And so I think for that, the one thing that stood out for me was I did a research project on religion and law in India. And that was brought up again in my interview at Oxford, because that was the field that my tutor who interviewed me specialized in. And I think that led to a really interesting conversation that went beyond the interview. And I think that's one of the things that stood out for me in my application. Yeah.
That's a very insightful take on it. Asking Nitana ma'am now, as a counsellor, I've been under your guidance for quite a few years now, and I've seen that you handle a very large pool of students. And with students, of course, come their parents as well. And you have a very large set of connects among admission officers around the world. I'm curious to know, where is the biggest disconnect in terms of what the students think that matters, what the parents push for, versus what the universities actually require?
Great question. Many questions woven into one. What parents really look at is prestige, ranking. With everything, rounded well and well-meaning, I think it's critical for parents to understand that the story needs to be decoded in a certain way. So the parents have to be a part of that journey to ensure that they are not helicoptering the child, but a passenger, and navigating that pathway in partnership with the school and the counselor, college counselor, and creating that path. So parents definitely need to get on board, understand that the world of the student today is very different from the world they think exists. Grade 9 onwards, they have a very, very important role. They have to look at the fit element more than the prestige element. That's really important. And they have to break that barrier of conventional degrees and conventional careers. There are some beautiful new careers that are coming up, and with AI and everything coming in, there are a whole new possibilities that are opening up, and universities are reinventing their courses every year. There's a lot of myths that need to be busted, where students feel that, oh my God, it has to be leadership, it has to be sports, it has to be MUNs, it has to be debating, it has to be everything. It's not about everything. It's about understanding what my strengths are, diving deeper into those areas, marinating it with what probably could be your choice of subject in college, and making a change into your little community with what you're passionate about, so that they can know that you're going to be an asset, and you're going to be coming in and also changing, bringing in a diverse perspective and changing in something in their community when you become a student in their college and the university. So that's for student. And for universities, authentic. I think they are not looking for perfect students. They're looking for students who are making a genuine effort and consistently making a genuine effort. So when they're putting their application together, it has to be something that has to be shown through the years to say that these are students who will work hard, will be purposeful, will contribute to the community, and the student has the ability to tell their own story by being comfortable in their own skin. So that's what I feel, and from the lens of the number of students that I've worked with, this is what I think fits well.
I'm going to rewatch this specific part of the podcast again when I get home, because there were a lot of information in this which is relevant to everyone here, irrespective of where they are in their field of life. And now if I were to ask my admission officers here, how would you explain authenticity, especially in terms of where now students think they are too smart to bring in ChatGPT and copy their essays off internet or AI? How would you say that in your own words?
Definitely, yeah. I think, that was so well said. Thank you so much for everything you said. I just want to reiterate that is all certainly true. I mean, NYU had a record number. It just every year it gets bigger and bigger. We had 120,000 applications that we reviewed this past year, and about overall like an 8% acceptance rate for all those students, So a big part of, and so, the academics are there, There's students who, we have very highly achieving students. And so really the helpful part is that genuineness that comes through in the application. And, a good part about the U.S. application is you do have that essay, and you do have a supplementary essay as well, at least at most colleges on the Common App. And so one of the questions that we ask is, how are you a bridge builder? How do you connect cultures? How are you interested in that cultural exchange? And so students, they could use ChatGPT. They could throw that question into ChatGPT and come up with an answer, and then change a few things, add a little bit of personal experience into it. But I think it just really comes across as very stale, when we read a very generic answer. And so when I'm talking to students about how to write the essay, a really important point that I emphasize is just kind of pick like one very important moment to you, and then kind of expand off of that. So, it's really about the authenticity coming through, as far as just really picking a real moment. So we put all that together and try to get to know you as a person in that gigantic pool of students.
I agree with everything that's already been said. Somebody that was not me, I think said it better at a recent podcast I was sitting on, when they said, it's not just about getting in, it's about getting on. And actually being authentic means that you find that best fit university for you. We would love for it to be Cambridge if that is the best fit. Yeah. But equally, if it doesn't suit you, you could be the brightest and best student, and that style of learning might not fit you. You would not enjoy it. Like NYU, we probe all of our applications. So we'll look at the references on UCAS. We'll look at your personal statement. We will probe through interview to discover that authenticity. And of course, finally, just to let people know that, of course, the UCAS process does have an AI checker on it as well.
That's a very good tip for everyone listening out there. Agastya, why don't you add your comments to it as well?
I think it's something that admissions officers will pick up on very quickly, and they'll know whether you are actually interested in what you've written and whether it's authentic or true to yourself or not. And I think that truly the strongest application you can make is something that excites you and something that you're really passionate about, because I think that the passion will flow through the application and it'll stand out a lot more than whether using AI to generate an answer. And I think you'll have a much stronger application if you remain true to yourself and your values and let them speak for themselves.
Of course, we again emphasize on the word of being authentic is the most important. Now we move on to a fun little segment, which is a myth-busting quick-fire, where I'll pose a question, a very short question, and we can go from my left to my right, answering them in very short words. All right, the first question, one myth you wish students stop believing about admissions.
I think for India in particular, the biggest myth is that marks are everything. Yes, the academics are important and you have to cross that barrier. But I think for the UK in particular, it's about academic interest over academic performance necessarily. Because once you clear that barrier, everyone who passes the first barrier of marks is at the same stage, and think about how you're going to show that in the best way possible.
I think for Cambridge, it's the getting through to the interview is the last part. At Cambridge, we look at everything holistically. So it's not a linear pathway. The interview is not the last barrier to jump. We will interview, we will look at your personal statement, we'll look at your references, we'll look at any admissions tests, and we will look at that all holistically and make a decision based on that.
I think that one just overall myth is that ranking is the most important thing. You want to choose the best fit for you, right? Secondly, I would like to myth bust something specific to NYU, which is many students, we have 10 different schools and colleges that students apply to, and some of the schools, especially, for example, the Stern School of Business is a very popular school for students to apply to, and it's very competitive, and students think, okay, well, if I apply to the College of Arts and Science, for example, and I get in there, then I can change my mind and then kind of backdoor my way into Stern, and that's just totally not true. Really, you should think long and hard about what school you want to apply to, what program you want to apply to, because that's going to come through in your application, first of all. And then secondly, it would be like another application review process to be admitted to Stern, for example. And it's so not something to bank on.
I think everybody said everything. But one myth is stop ticking the checkbox. You do not have to do everything to get to college, right? You have to pick up what is specific to you in terms of activities, because you have limited time. The world around you is buzzing at a speed which is like, oh God. And you want to pick up every thread and say, hey, I want to go ahead and do this, but not really. Sit down, reflect, pause, and say that, all right, in my phase of exploration, I might want to look at just those 5 activities and do that. And then probably when you step into year 11 and 12th, you say, out of those 5, let me pick up 3 and dive deeper. So depth over breadth and not ticking the checkbox.
Those were all equally important, if I were to say. Now moving on to the next question. One underrated habit in school that actually signals success to you.
I think consistency is the most important thing. I think showing up not just for yourself, but for your work every day. Because I understand that the college admissions process is incredibly taxing. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights, and a lot of effort goes into it. So staying resilient and consistent and not getting upset by each rejection that comes your way, because there will be many rejections. But I think you have to stay focused, stay consistent, and not get distracted by a setback.
Thank you. The word I was going to use was actually already picked up, and it was resilience. Many students that get into high-quality global universities have naturally been top of their school, and suddenly they're in an environment where they may just be middling because everybody was top of their school. And so being resilient, knowing that you're there for a reason, being confident in yourself. And it's a big step if you're traveling overseas, studying as an international student, having that resilience and confidence in yourself that you're doing the right thing and moving on.
It's really funny because that's exactly, I was going to say resilience too, and I think it just shows you how important that is. And, I think students are so concerned about not making mistakes, and really, it's important to make mistakes, and how do you rebound from those mistakes? And that's, it's a central piece of kind of what we look for in prospective students is, you're going to encounter challenges. We don't expect you to be perfect in every single way. But then the important piece is, how do you react to that challenge? How did you overcome that challenge? So, and because you're going to encounter a lot of challenges moving abroad, if that's what you choose to do, whatever school, or just making that step from high school to the university level, you're going to encounter challenges. So we want to make sure that you're going to be able to react to those challenges and be a success after that.
Everybody's again taken everything, but students are aspirational. So are parents, right? I think brilliance is about showing up every single day, engaging with your educators, in each class in a meaningful and mindful way. While you do that, and this is for all my counseling community folks who are going to be watching this, is build relationship with your school counselor. It is not just about weaving that application together at the end of the high school that you go and see your college counselor. It's about embedding into the ecosystem of school to say, I need to know my college counselor. I need to foster a relationship. And that's also the bedrock of understanding how great networking needs to start, because once you get to university abroad, you're on your own. You need to network with people, learn to foster relationships, and so that they understand you, you understand them. And when all of that is fit into the jigsaw puzzle of the application, the admission officer can clearly see it, that it's been woven it beautifully. So all to students and to college counselors there, it's that encourage children to build relationship with their educators, a deep relationship.
I mean, this has been one of the most important answers, if I were to say, because this is a common answer we've got from all four of our guests. The two words I picked up are consistency and resilience. So that's very well put by all of our guests here. For our next question, Nitra ma'am, why don't we start with you?
Oh, great.
One thing Indian students should unlearn to compete globally.
I feel that the experience that our children have with the environment, I think where every space speaks to students, I have no doubt they're going to be capable children. I think the copability element is what I want students to really pick up. You know, when you're on the university on your own, do you understand what it takes to be financially literate? Do you know the art of managing your own self 24 hours without your parents? It's about, am I really making an impact or trying to be a better version of myself every single day, along with being accountable for everything that the university does ask you to do. So I think diversity of perspective there is critical, but that all cannot be suddenly embedded into a student saying that, okay, fine, we've put you onto the university, here you go. So copability element and building that in is absolutely important.
Maybe this is a little controversial, but perhaps unlearn some of the expectations. As an international student, you may have reached the expectations of your parents, your school, your community, that you will do this, you will achieve this, and this is fantastic. But take that time to experience the educational system of where you are, explore some subjects perhaps outside of your comfort zone. Even in the UK, you can usually take modules outside of your chosen major. Take some time to travel, perhaps, volunteer, learn some different skills. You may end up going in a different direction to the one that you and everybody else expected of you.
I think I'm going to build off what Luke said, is in India, there's a big problem of following the crowd. Yeah. So I still remember when I was in grade 10, I think most of my friends were set on studying engineering. And I think it's at that point where and there's also obviously lots of parental pressure here, where a lot of people's parents will want them to study, either become doctors or engineers. And I think that's the point where you have to stay true to yourself. And I know Luke mentioned the liberal arts education system, and I think that's probably one of the most underrated systems in the world, with just the breadth of the experience that it offers you. So I think not following the crowd and being able to keep an open mind about different subjects, and even about the arts, for example, keep an open mind and don't shut yourself off to any particular thing too early. Yeah.
Right. Agastya, as a student who has spent a year abroad now and having experienced the Indian education system, do you truly believe that schools prepare Indian students enough for the thinking and independence required to stay abroad?
I think this goes back to a lot about the Indian curriculum in general. So I did CBSE, which is it's fairly rigorous, but it's a very set way of thinking and learning. I know Shiv Nadar School teaches it very differently, and it teaches you to have an open mind, think of different perspectives. But the one thing that I felt was very different when I went to Oxford is the tutorial system. And I think that's completely changed the way I think, learn, and even study. The direct interaction I have with my professors and the level of thinking that we do over there is absolutely incredible. But it was also a very steep learning curve. Oxford itself is a very rigorous environment, so is Cambridge, in fact. And I don't think Indian schools, as of now, prepare you in a sufficient manner to handle yourself over there. I think a lot of schools do it very differently. Ours, I think, prepared me a fair bit for it. But you have to be prepared for a very steep learning curve. And I think the curriculum needs to change a bit better to maybe be slightly similar to the IB, for example, and allow you to explore different subjects without being too rigid. Yeah.
Of course. That was a very honest perspective, and thank you so much for that. To leave our listeners with something concrete, for a grade 10 or 11 student listening today, what is one thing that they can start doing this week which is going to matter 3 years from now on, no matter where they apply? So why don't we start with you, Agastya?
I would say exploring as many fields and possibilities as possible. Now, I'm not saying they have to start applying for internships in grade 10, but maybe just starting to, say, shadowing someone, speaking to people in different fields so that you can figure out what you're actually interested in and what you want to do. So I think just being able to speak to someone, whether you speak to someone who's in the year above you, you speak to someone who's from your school who's currently at the particular university, I think the very fact that you're speaking to someone gives you a personal experience that you can use and rely on to make stronger choices. Yeah.
Well,
I think for somebody younger, the best advice I can give is be curious. Be curious about your subjects. If you have a passion for maths, delve deeply into maths, do some additional maths problems. If you love English, read some of the great books you've got here in the library. But just go beyond what you're learning at school to explore your passions. And then wherever you end up, whatever you end up studying, be passionate about it.
Yeah, I think that really at that stage, really taking the time to explore what you're really interested in and passionate about. We talked about how important authenticity is in the application and review process, and that authenticity is going to come as a result of when you're, say, in 9th or 10th grade, you are really diving into your passions. And so I would say, don't have too much of a mindset like, okay, I got to prepare already for the college admissions process. Have more of the mindset, I need to take the time to really enjoy what I'm passionate about, and what I'm interested in, and getting that depth of experience just as a result of that.
I would encourage students of high school to get out of their comfort zone. It's really important, and also understanding that time management, thought management, making those choices are really, really important at this point in time. So, yeah, getting out of the comfort zone is really, really important.
is there a question you wish students ask you more often? Or one, if I were to say, that they ask you less?
What is one thing they should ask me more is how to research universities, how to navigate newer choices and courses. What are the resources, though even if we share it with them, but is there an easy guide, etc., where the newer courses, etc., they could ask, they could explore, they could put their thinking hats on for that.
I had a question recently and I thought that was a really good question. I wish people asked me that more. And it was really, what can Cambridge do for me? And we meet so many students that want to come to Cambridge because they think they should get in, and this student had taken the time to see how might you be the best fit for me. So I'm guessing that's the question I'd like to hear more of.
I think question people don't ask enough is how do I figure out what I want to do, what I want to study? Because I think a lot of people don't take too much thought, or they, again, like I said, follow the crowd with what they want to do. And I think if more people started asking themselves, how do I figure out what I want to study? Who should I speak to? Where should I go? I think they'll be able to figure out a more holistic answer, yeah.
Posing a question to our guests, what is one skill you wish all students would learn in school?
I would say, adaptability is really important. And I think that, that partly comes through naturally as a result of kind of the challenges that we talked about and how students respond to those challenges. But, getting a sense of adaptability is an important.
Right, to not be limited to the prescribed curriculum that is there.
Exactly.
Going
yeah.
outside, yeah, of course. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's perhaps the confidence to talk academically with people that are slightly older than them or perceived to be at a higher level than them. And I think that's something that tends to come with age and confidence. But at Cambridge and at Oxford, it's very much a conversational style of learning. And I suppose perhaps one of the things I wish people knew about Cambridge and Oxford is that we're quite friendly people, and to have the confidence to actually talk about a subject that you're passionate about to academics.
I think building on your point, I think having faith in yourself is really important, especially, for example, at Oxford and Cambridge, where you're intimidated by the professor that you're sitting in front of you, and the fact that you're having a one-on-one conversation with them. I think you should feel comfortable to be able to speak to them at the same level and be able to give your own opinion without worrying about what they have to say, because they are experts in their field. So I think being able to have that level of confidence in yourself to answer the question and speak to them on the same level is very important.
Communication, I think more or less everybody said, but embracing rejection and failure, I think it's really important. If I could word it a little better, constructive criticism, adapting to failure, accepting and understanding why did it happen to me, and communication. There's a grace in communicating, and I think students of today need to understand what it is about being graceful in communicating, and it can be seen through your application clearly.
What's any film or book you would recommend all of your students to listen to gain a new perspective?
Well, I'm happy to go first. And my answer might be a bit of a cop-out, but it's not one film or book that I could give anybody advice on, because as soon as you say, read this book or do that, people do it. I think my advice would be read any book or watch any film that you feel passionate about and then be able to talk about it.
I would build exactly where Sarah is, though we encourage a lot of reading culture, but when I say from a college counselling perspective, I would rather say that dive deeper into your area of subject and read. So you probably could subscribe to universities' newsletters, right, from high school, and start reading those, because then you'll get to understand what is the whole ecosystem looking like for me.
I think my answer is going to be a bit personalized, but a book I read fairly early on in the application process, which I think anyone should read if they're interested in studying law or even philosophy, was The Rule of Law by the late Justice Tom Bingham. It's a really great way of simplifying legal philosophy and understanding how the law works and why it works, just the way that it's explained and broken down really complex topics. I think that really helped solidify me wanting to do law.
I feel like I'm unfortunately I'm not going to give a specific answer either personally, but I just think that reading, I love reading. I was an English literature major as an undergraduate student. I love watching films. I think that they're both just such amazing ways to gain different perspectives from yourself. So just follow your passion and read and find films that are really interesting to you.
If you would have a time machine at your disposal, and if you could go back in time and have a conversation with your 16-year-old self and give a piece of advice, what would it be? Ma'am, why don't we start with you?
At our time, we got into careers by chance, not by choice. I wish there was somebody who helped me understand who I truly was, what my strengths were. I think I could have done multiple other things beautifully, but I wish I could tell myself to have someone who could mentor me at that particular time and guide me, to take me or lead me into something that could have been truly magical.
It's kind of funny because I feel like my 16-year-old self kind of had the opposite experience than a lot of students now have, where students are so understanding of kind of the career, how education leads to a career. And at that time, I was very unsure. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And so I thought, I guess, I like reading. I guess maybe I'll study English, and I guess I'll be a teacher. I was interested in Japanese language, and so I could have, explored Japanese literature and become even more versed in Japanese literature or something like that at the time. I just didn't realize that certain things were an option. So I think it's just getting an idea of what options are out there and realizing that they are achievable. The advice would be to realize that you can achieve your dreams, whatever they may be.
I suppose for me, my advice to my younger self would be there are lots of pathways to the end dream. Hands on the table, I was a failed medic. I was down that medicine route. I did not get the grades, so I had to go a different route. I ended up studying pharmaceuticals, worked in that industry for 10 years, hated it. I didn't know that because that's what I'd been channeled to do ever since I was young. Fell into a different career quite by chance and absolutely love it. So there are ways of things turning out differently, but how you expect them to.
Agastya, of course, you're not too old to come back in time, but if you could just rewind a few years, if I would say, go back to your high school self and give a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think not just to myself, but to most of my peers too, is to not be in a rush to grow up and to really take the time. High school is a really special time in your life, and it also goes by really, really quickly. And I know everyone wants to go to college, they want to move to the next part of their lives, but it's just such a special time. And I think if I'd slowed down and appreciated it just a little bit more, and not been in that much of a rush to go to college. I think that's the advice I give. Don't be in a rush to grow up.
A very big thank you to all our guests for taking out the time to have this conversation with me. And for our listeners out there, start building that future version of yourselves and stay tuned for the next podcast.